Yeah? No? Yeah, take it as a yes. So I've probably got very little time, so I'll go through it as quick as I can. My topic today is going to be disrupting or pissing off an APT. When I talk about APTs, I'm talking about somebody who brings a lot of focus, a lot of attention to an organisation. Thank you. Some talk about nation states, organised crime, red team, and basically sophisticated attackers. So when I talk about pissing off, I actually mean not completely sort of mitigating it, but just sort of trying to make it harder for them so you can stop them. So a tiny bit about me. If you probably can't realise, I've got a bit of a weird accent. I'm from Wales, which is a part of the UK. My biggest claim to fame, I've got twin boys. I've actually been in the Bollywood film. And that Bollywood film, as you can see at the bottom right, if you can see it, was described as an insult to cinema. So I had to move away from my acting career and concentrate on being a hacker. So when we talk about the enemy and the APTs, so we talk about people who basically don't care about the risk register or what you've got in terms of your how you're trying to mitigate things. They just go after whatever's available. And this KiwiCon poster from 2009 is still relevant today. So when you're looking to create a robust and secure organisation, you really need to make sure that you're mitigating your entire ecosystem and environment. How do you do that? So you can do that through a number of different methods. Most people do it through red teaming or attack simulation. It's probably worth noting that red team isn't pen testing, a completely different skill sets, different things. When we talk about red teaming, so when we talk about pen testing, we talk about protection. So how many pen testers have we got in the room? Yeah, not that many, should be more. But when we talk about pen testing, we're talking about limited scope, limited IP addresses, very, very focused on what you're doing. When we talk about red teaming, we're talking about protection, detection, and response. So getting in is one thing, but actually seeing somebody doing something and doing something about it is something else, and that's really important. As I said, red team's got a completely different mindset, so it's typically low and slow and not running Nessus or something like that. Don't do mass scanning, the bad guys don't do it, they don't normally need to do it. And slow and steady to achieve the goals, whatever that might be, whether some intellectual property or some sort of credential or some sort of sensitive resource. Something that I get asked quite a lot, as again, the APT is not going to care about this, but to be resilient, you really need to be hitting at that respond part of that chart. So you really need to be mature in terms of what you're doing, so you need to be doing your vulnerability scanning, your pen testing, you're just going to concentrate on the technology, and then on top of that, then you need to stress the people in the process. And typically this is done through the cycle kill chain. Does anybody know what the cycle kill chain is? Yeah, no, maybe. It's just a series of steps that APTs and bad guys go through to try and compromise an environment and get a certain objective. So I've been pen testing, red teaming for quite a long time, and there's some things that are universally true. A big, expensive, shiny box doesn't make you secure, and I think that's a pretty well-known fact. You need more, you need a hell of a lot more, basically need to get the basics done. And by the basics, I mean patching, hardening, passwords, all that great stuff. But across an enterprise, that's really hard. And from my experience, people don't tend to do that very well. And you need layers. You need that everywhere in terms of people, process, and technology. And my second observation, having done a lot of this, it's not 0 days that sort of mess people up. It's really poor OPSEC. Admittedly, somebody's going to come in with a 0 day, which is fine, but that shouldn't be the end of your environment. You should have resiliency and layers to be able to protect against that. You know, how many people have seen things like this? So you run in a SQL box saying I'm just running as the main admin. Well, that is very poor practice. You can easily escalate that. So don't do that. That's not a very good thing to do. So how do you actually disrupt and piss off an APT? So this is the triangle of pain, as it's called. And what you need to do is you need to be moving from the trivial up to the tough. So the trivial is typically tactical. So for example, if you're beaconing out via DNS for your command and control, as you mentioned earlier this morning, you can stop that easily just by IP addresses, you can bang that down. But a resilient attacker is just going to spin up some more IP addresses. So you need to move up from tactical up to strategical and behavioral type changes. So your tools and your TTPs, tactics, techniques and procedures, is what you're really looking to stop. So again, if you're doing your DNS beaconing, you need to make sure that your environment is sufficiently robust that it'll spot these large number of DNS text records flying in and out of your environment. And that's hard, that's really hard to do, and that's why it's tough at the top. So you really need to make sure that you're building in proper resiliency as you're sort of trying to increase your maturity and your resiliency. How else do we do this? The attack vector, which is a knowledge-based sort of type framework. I don't know if people are aware of it, it's a really good body of work, and that will get a lot of TTP, so I'd highly recommend you have a look at that. It's something that I've actually contributed to, and I spend a lot of time using it and abusing it, so have a look at that. What's really important is to make it really hard for those attackers. So you use a key card and you lock everything down. Don't run anything as the main admin, don't run anything with excessive privileges, segregate, don't use rubbish passwords, and patch everything all the time. So how does a bad guy sort of look to get into an environment? You've got to start at the beginning, and that is typically you always hint everything, I mean everything. So your social media, all the things. So if I look at, for example, my organisation Trustlive, you can see there that our email address is pretty common and pretty easy to work out. It's worth bearing in mind that an email address isn't a secret, it's not something that's kept secret, but it's really useful when you're looking to get into an organisation and do something. Again, we do a lot of subdomain discovery, so we look at UAT, tests, VPN, sometimes VPN is a two-factor, something like that, and it's easy access. So good old shoulder. So there's, I don't know, does everyone know what our port number is? 4786? Cisco Smart Install. If you've got that on the internet, you're asking for trouble, so don't do that, that's bad. And there's a number of nation states who are actively exploiting that to cause problems. Again, if you look at Showdown, you're looking at SMB, like there's 2.5 million SMB services. Get rid of that, that's not a good idea. Similarly, RDP, 3 million, that's crazy. And you get things like this, where you can see RDP is listening. It's not, that box isn't being patched, it's got default usernames, so that there's a lot of bad things happening there. And you can enumerate usernames as well. So you really need to be making sure that your external facing infrastructure is locked down. So you're making it hard, or at least making it harder for the attackers. Who's using cloud-based services like O365, G Suite? Yeah, we have those, that's great. It's easy to work out if you're using those things. DNS text records and MX records give a huge amount of information away, and we often spend a lot of time figuring that out, looking for O365. If you think you've got MFA enabled, which is a good thing, make sure you're doing it correctly. There's a little bit more on that later, but you really need to make sure that you're locking these things down because everything's going to the cloud. And it's a really good launch pad into an environment. Anti-spoofing techniques, so SPF, DKIM, and DMAP, so making sure that it's not easy for us to spoof emails or for the bad guys to spoof emails. Because once you get that level of trust, you're able to spoof an email, you can do a lot more actions once that's happened. And there's just an example of an organisation passing. So you can use things like Fokker and things to get sort of sensitive information from documents, versioning, and things like that. It's really useful for phishing. How do people get in? How do bad guys get in? Phishing is still a big thing. Macros, to my surprise, in 2018 are still very popular. There's a report just from NCSC in the UK. Macros is still the #1 way that organisations get compromised. So just don't allow macros. And I know Office 365 you can it's disabled by default. So just make sure that you're really doing some of the latest and greatest things, because that's easy. Easy. HTAs via HTML. You can do some dynamic decryption, and it's done on the fly, so it doesn't even touch disk and things like that. So you need to be mindful of HTAs coming into your environment. OLE, DDEs was big, probably 6 months to a year ago. Seeing less of that now. Typically, it's still very useful. We're seeing a lot of smishing, so SMS phishing. We get a lot of success through that. We did a recent test recently where we did SMS, got into O365. Registered a device and got into the environment that way. You can't mitigate that, that's a really hard thing to mitigate. Social media phishing is also really popular. How often do you click on links that come from LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or whatever? It's a lot more common for people to do that than via their traditional work email. So be mindful of that. Watering hole again is very successful. We get a lot of routes to that, so we will compromise a website, search some sort of malicious content on the website, and then people browse that website. There's some legal implications with that, so you need to be very mindful. But that is a very common way of people getting knocked over. And then your normally third-party exploits, NDAs, and then your browsers. User agents are really useful, so you can figure out if you're running an old version of Chrome or an old version of Firefox, you can fire up an NDA or a 0-day if you're that lucky, and then you can fire that off, get some sort of corruption, and then leverage that. And then what again is really important is login portal cloning. So again, we combine swishing with a login portal so people will try and authenticate, we'll capture the credentials, redirect them, and then sign in them to their account. Password spraying is really popular and something that we do a lot of. Again, the process is OSINT, get the usernames. People are always going to have easy to guess passwords, unfortunately, in a large organisation. And then we'll download the GAL and then kick off again because we'll have a list of everybody and we look then for the persons of interest. And there's a link for that. So Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, have got a lot of techniques that sort of break some of this. So I would definitely recommend you applying some of these techniques. So they've got anti-phishing tools, there's some mailbox intelligence, with safe links and things like that. The smart IP lockout, which I don't see enough people using. Ban passwords, don't create a password, password one, or something that's based in your organisation, but that's not good, shall I say. And people don't use these things, so make sure you're enabling these things on your O365 or your G Suite, just to make sure that you're getting the best. And as I said earlier, the reality is these techniques are not being used by defenders, so it makes our job as an attacker or as somebody trying to bring a bit of heat into an organisation a lot easier, a lot simpler. And as you can see, these things are perfect. There was a safe links bypass, a base ref bypass probably 3 or 4 months ago that allowed us to bypass any safe links. So even if you are implementing these things, you've got to realise they're not perfect, and there is no one silver bullet. It's all about the limits. So what really starts to piss them off and piss me off when I'm doing these things? Good passwords for an organisation. NIST recently created some guidelines on creating good passwords. I don't see enough of this in an organisation. There's minimum 8 characters everywhere. It doesn't differentiate between admin and non-admin, so obviously admin need to make it significantly longer and harder. A dictionary of disallowed passwords, password one and common passwords, so you don't always do that. Was interestingly allow non-printing characters, so like a space or something like that. So it's going to increase the entropy of the password. It's going to make it a lot harder for somebody like me to try and guess it. Throttling, so some sort of, if somebody is smashing into some password spraying, then making sure that they can't just get at what they want straight away. Some sort of throttling. And again, Office 365 and G Suite allows you to do all of this. A contentious point is not having passwords expire. The new rule of thumb is get a good password, don't share it, and leave it. The sort of passwords that are changed regularly tend to be really bad and tend to follow a common format, like summer 2018 and things like that. So don't do that. So once you've got a good password, keep it and don't share it with other accounts. And there's some guidelines, again from NCSC, about not having passwords expire and non-expiration and things like that. And so Microsoft are finally catching up, and they're now allowing you to create these longer passwords, which is going to make it really hard for me and bad guys to do what they do. Another thing that really frustrates the bad guys is 2FA. Let me see what's wrong with this version of 2FA. So it uses SMS. So don't use SMS when you're doing 2FA. As you know, SMS is dead. It's easy you can walk into a shop, get the phone cloned, and then you can send and then receive the SMS code for that. TSB in the UK, which is a bank, got absolutely hammered by that very recently. So if you are doing 2FA, make sure you do it properly with a Google Authenticator or something along those lines. So it's really hard for somebody to get in on a secure account. So recently, again, we did a red team against pretty sophisticated organisation, and they're 2FA and all their 365, but they didn't have 2FA on Exchange Web Services. So if you are using Exchange Web Services, make sure that you're locking that down, because EWS, Exchange Web Services, doesn't always have 2FA, so you can just use a native app on your Mac to get access to that mailbox, and then you're in, you're up and running, you've got a foothold. So really lock that down and make sure you've got 2FA everywhere. And there's the default URL for Exchange Web Services. So have a look at that, see if you've got that running, and see if you can connect to it with your normal creds and it not require 2FA. Proper 2FA, there was a recent report by Google. They reckon they haven't been fished in over a year, just for a simple proper 2FA account. So it really makes a big difference. Things like this, proper 2FA, makes it a lot harder for the bad guys who are looking to get into your environment. So as a recommendation, do the basics well, and then you'll be significantly more resilient than where you were before. Removing technical debt. By technical debt, I mean where somebody's not patching, taking shortcuts and creation of code, or just not doing their due diligence. And that's hard across a large environment. You're talking about 2003 boxes, like an old AS400 in the corner that nobody really knows what it's doing. Those are the things that we're going to use, those are the things that we're going to attack. And this, as I said, this can be really difficult in large, complex environments. Microsoft recently, again, there was their new mentality now is to assume breach. So by that we mean assume somebody's already in your network, whether it's intentional or unintentional. And defenders think in lists and attackers think in graphs. So what that actually means is locking down one box isn't going to make you secure. You need to be able to look at where that sensitive resource is authenticating, for example. And there's a classic example where an admin signs onto a workstation and the DC is locked down with it. The workstation gets compromised because they're not doing their best practice, and then you steal creds technically from that box to get at the domain admin, or to get at the domain. So bear in mind that you need to make sure that your entire environment is robust and secure. Just doing a pen test on your latest bit of kit, which is 2016, which is probably pretty good out of the box, is not going to make you secure. You need to do the whole environment. And then on top of that, then do the people and the process as well, and that's where the compromises happen. The end user device, in my mind, is the battleground. So you're talking about desktops, phones, those are the things that we like to look at, and those are the things that we like to compromise. There's a great talk this morning on Mac firewalls, and that is the type of thing that we look at. As soon as we get onto a box or a phone or whatever, it's the situational awareness. So we look at what's running, what can we do, what can we leverage, is apps running, is there a firewall running, is it switch running, etc., etc. So this is where we concentrate a lot of our efforts. And this is where the bad guys concentrate a lot of their effort, because this is where they land. If they do get some sort of compromise, 90 times out of 100, they're going to land on some sort of end user device for somebody who have done something. So this is where you need to put your security, concentrate your security. So once we get a foothold, or once the bad guys get a foothold, probably one of the two things is likely to happen. Situational awareness, as I mentioned. So we can see what's on the box, what can we figure out, what can we infer from this environment, from this box that's going to help us in a wider environment. Is Sys1 running, for example? Is there lots of logging? That will tell me that there's the wider environment that's got lots of logging. So we really need to be mindful of what we're doing. So we're not going to hit the DC straight away because there might be Microsoft ATA or something similar. We're going to enumerate the local host, and then we're going to spin out to the network to see where the sensitive threads are, who's doing what, where. What's going on? Is there a SQL Server box running that's going to have some sort of database that's going to be really useful for us? So those are the type of things that we're going to look at. So I would recommend that you harden your end user device. This is a high-level version here. If you're running Windows, get LAPS, the local administrative password solution. That's going to step you up quite a bit straight away. Whitelisting, AppLocker. Do people need to run command.exe? Do people need to get at the C drive? Those type of things. Once you land on the desktop and you can't do those things, it makes it really hard then to sort of break out. So just raising that bar, making things harder. And if somebody is able to sort of escalate their privileges, having appropriate events that will trigger that and then you can spot those events. Having host-based firewall. Do desktops or do end user devices need to talk to one another? Making sure that devices only communicate with what they should be communicating. Sounds really simple, but in reality, it's really hard to do in a big environment. And log in, so whether it's PowerShell or Sysmon, those are the type of things that, if you assume breach, if you assume somebody's not going to get in, these are the things that's going to make it harder for somebody to do something. When they do something silly, whether they've looked at domain admins, you can flag that event and then instantly you can do something about it, or as quickly as you can. So I wrote a little tool on there. It's pretty useful. It's on Kali. It's good for post exploitation. Does all that stuff. But what I wanted to show was, see the Kerberos thing. It's my favourite thing. Kerberos thing. Yeah, cool. So as a domain user, so if you get onto a box as a domain user, you can send out one sort of packet, and you can, through the magic of Kerberos and its complexity, you can get back assuming a set of credentials. And this is just really hard to trace on the network. It's just a simple example. And that's hard to detect. So you need to make sure that you're really locking these things down and you're looking for appropriate event IDs. There's a couple of event IDs, but they're quite noisy. So you really need to make sure that you're not logging everything, but you're logging what you think is going to be useful to an attacker. This SPN hunting being one of them. A lot of users, or a lot of the bad guys, one thing onto the desktop, the new thing is to live off the land. That's not my house, by the way. The bad guys in 2018, from my experience, are less likely to upload tools, malware. They're going to use a lot of in-built tools that are available on the box. PowerShell being a classic example. If you can downgrade to PowerShell v2, we'll definitely do that, because there's no logging, or we'll use WMI or the net commands, the net suite of commands to try and enumerate and move laterally through the environment. Again, just another example of living off the land. So when we're looking to get credentials, say we've got a local admin box and local admin cred, we can use the registry tool that's inbuilt to download the SAM system and the security hives. You can pull them off and then get the creds. So there's no LSAS injection, there's no sort of process spinning up, so it makes things a lot harder to detect, which is why we tend to do these things. Malware can be, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that. So red teaming and bad guys getting in isn't only about protection, as I mentioned earlier. It's really about slowing the bad guys down sufficiently so you can get at them, so you can spot them in terms of visibility, and then do something about it. Those are the keys. So event IDs, imagine most people have got Windows domains. We typically see two types of event logging, whether they log everything or nothing, and they're probably both as useless as each other. You need to make sure that you're logging the correct sort of events. And what are they? So there's a number of different ones. This one is where people try to clear all the event logs, and that in itself creates an event. So there's no user that should be trying to clear their event logs. So you can log that and put an event on that and then capture that. So if you see somebody creating 1102, which is the event ID for clearing event logs, across multiple boxes, you know there's some issues going on. So you can do something about that. And there's an example of that. Security logs being cleared. Secondly, local group changes. There's absolutely no reason why a local user, or a domain user of any description should be making changes to the local group. And again, there's two events to fire off for that. And again, local account creation is used for persistence quite often. There's absolutely no reason why people should be doing that. So you should be monitoring that and looking for it. Lateral account movement is another thing that we look for. So if somebody's SMB signing interactively to another box, you can monitor that and then flag on that. Application crashes, if you're not using Windows 10, you've got something like emit, you can look for those things. So if somebody's run a flash exploit or crash or IE, you can actually trigger an event on that, and that can get pushed off to your scene, and you can look for that. So that's really important. Service installation, so again, if you're using something like ESExec, which I would recommend, that will create service, and you can flag on that. There's absolutely no reason why anybody should be doing that. So it's a good indicator of some sort of compromise going on. Just some examples of people using event IDs. Again, password spraying, which is something quite popular. You can again log an event on that and make sure that you're tracking those events correctly. What happens if you don't use SMB? So you can use LDAP, which currently I don't think Microsoft ATA flags on, but again, there's events you can use for that. So make sure that you really understand what's going on in your network and you can properly event, you can capture the proper events and see them what's going on. And as I mentioned, some Kerberos logging again, there's some identities for that for the Kerberos. So blue teamers at a high level, what you really need to do, and this is hard as I appreciate, you really need to understand your network. You need to know what data is flowing where, so you can restrict it. You need to concentrate on the TTPs and the behaviors that attackers do. Don't just look at patching a box or changing the password. It's looking at the environment and how you can make sure that all your boxes are patched, or that all the passwords are secure. Because those are the type of things that's going to trick people. I see this all the time, domain function levels, not using the benefits of the latest versions of Microsoft. So all too often we see domain controllers running, or sort of domain function level running at Windows 2003, whereas really you should be looking to get Windows 2008, where you can get fine-grained password policies. So you can set different OUs, so your admins can have different password policy from your normal people, from your normal users, or you can get remote users who have a different password policy. Last interactive login information, that's really useful. Again, if somebody sees something a bit weird, that will flag up and invite somebody signing into my account at 3 o'clock in the morning. Windows 2012 has got some additional protections, so it's harder to do some of the mini-cats tricks and things like that. So I definitely recommend you do that. One thing I don't see enough of is privileged access workstations. So that is basically a Microsoft term to really lock down an environment or lock down an end user device. So I definitely recommend people do that and stop doing domain admin tasks where you don't need to do it. You know, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of privileges out there. So to understand what you're doing, make sure you understand, and then just assign the bare amount of privilege that you need. Easy for me to say now. Microsoft have got a red forest architecture. I reckon there's probably 3 or 4 of these in the world that have been implemented correctly. In essence, you are segregating all your domains correctly and securely, and everything's got separate patching policies and trusts, and you can't go from tier 0 to tier 2 where your desktops are, tier 0 where your domain controls are. It's very complicated, people don't do it, but that is the end goal, and I recommend people do that. Going back to this pyramid of pain, this is how you actually stop the bad guys, how you actually piss them off, the APTs. You need to move from the tactical changes and instances in your environment up to the strategical and the TTPs and the tools, and that's really hard in an environment that's complex and diverse. You need to consider the environment as a whole and not just separate bits of IT. In conclusion, get the basics done, even though they're really hard to do across the environment. Keep on top of the basics. Layers. Make sure that one thing, 1 0 day, one missing patch, one new patch doesn't blow everything up for you, makes you have a bad day. Try and make sure that you've got multiple layers and multiple defenses. And visibility is key. We talk about event IDs and talk about visibility. Once you've got that visibility, you can react to it appropriately and make sure that you do. And that's it. So I'll run through that pretty quick. I know people don't like asking questions, but if you do have any questions, I'm around for the next couple of days. Yeah, I'm off to sign that.